Located. And I went in there and I said to her, would you come out and see this piece I did? She wouldn't. I said, I need to, and my partner in my gallery was a partner in a big law firm. And then I had a big fire, but he kept saying in the studio, and he kept saying, we need to open up a gallery in Washington, because he was a big sculptor collector. And after the fire, that's what happened. I opened up an art center at 15th and Rhode Island. That's where the gallery was. We had 50 artist studios. We had the Dance Exchange and Studio Theater. And we moved in there 10 years after the riots. In 1978, the riots were in 68. In fact, last year, Washingtonian did a story on 50 years after the riots, and we were some of the first people interviewed because we were the first people that moved in there. And I mean, literally before an opening, I'd have to take out the broom and sweep the condoms out of the alley. I mean, it was an experience. But yeah, and it's funny when we talk about Georgetown. I'm sure you remember the incinerator and the bayou and all those places. Well, when I was in Georgetown, they kept saying, any day now, that incinerator's going to be rebuilt. And that was like from 73 to 77. And then I moved to 15th and Rhode Island, and they kept saying any day now 14th Street's going to get rebuilt. Well, by the time in 86 I moved to 7th Street, I think they did the incinerator. They turned it into the Ritz sometime maybe 15 years ago. And they finally started cleaning up 14th Street, but it was decades and decades later. So, and now they've obviously fixed up downtown, but, again, they've priced all the galleries out. But I had been there 24 years, and it was enough. 24 years of street-level retail, and then 9 years at 15th and Rhode Island, and now I have this fabulous gallery in my home in Shepherd Park, which is a double lot. I have a sculpture garden in front. I converted my swimming pool into an in-ground sculpture garden. And guys have really got to come and see it. In fact, hopefully some of these pieces will end up there. No, I actually prefer if they got sold. But I mean, other than, but if they don't, I'll still keep showing them. But I'm one of these people that at 10 knew who I always knew who I was and what I wanted to do. I danced at 4. I sculpted at 10, and that's who I am. I've always been who I am. I didn't have to go find myself. I never even understood the concept of finding yourself until I got to college when I was in class with all these kids who were in liberal arts who had no idea. I said, you are what you're good at, and the saddest thing in life is when somebody does not want to do what they're good at.
What, the ring on your index finger there, when you're, your right hand, it's hitting the wood.
Oh. Kidding.
Why is it important to you to kind of showcase local artists and craftsmen?
Okay. Am I allowed to correct you?
Yes, of course.
Okay. We refer to artists in the Washington area and everywhere as area artists, because nobody would talk about a New York City artist by saying a local artist. A local artist is sort of considered almost a negative connotation. So we'd like to say area artists. And so I've been showing them, I would say in general, about 50% of the artists I show are from the Washington metropolitan area, and that may actually be from Baltimore to Richmond. About 40% are national, and about 10% are international. Especially with sculpture. I mean, I just had a conversation with somebody the other night who was trying to turn me on to this extraordinary sculptor in Arizona, who is this incredibly rich guy with all this land and made up these huge sculptures, but it's like, that's a little hard. I mean, I'm gonna get those huge things here, and and there's plenty of sculptors here, and this last show that was here was the 35th anniversary of the Washington Sculptures Group, and about 45 of 400 artists applied, and we had a committee, and we ended up picking 6. We were supposed to pick 5, but artists, we don't like rules. Anyway, so, but I knew that when I saw all that work, and I've been basically going through the Washington Sculpture Group's website for decades now, finding artists, and probably half the shows I've had here are artists that are in the Washington Sculpture Group. And especially when I saw David's work, I knew that I would have a show for him. You know, I actually prefer doing this than having put him in the last show, because we only would have had 4 or 5 pieces. And frankly, there's not that many sculptors who have the body of work that is both appropriate for this building and that's enough work for the building. So I don't do one-person shows here very often, just because it's a whole lot of art. But, and it's a great location, I mean, albeit from what it's across from, but maybe that's going to change soon. And it is for sale. And that's okay. So, you know, people say, how do they get in my gallery? And I basically, my short answer is, it has to knock my socks off. And if you come to my home gallery, which I wish you would, it's phenomenal, and you guys have got to come. I always tell an artist, the worst thing you can possibly say to a gallery owner is, my work is just like so-and-so. Well, if it's just like so-and-so, what do I want you? What do I need you? And I mean, you know, and my home is my gallery, and people often say to me, you live here? You know, and I'm like, it's my salvation, you know, because the thing about artists is, artists don't think in terms, and especially sculptors, don't think in terms of weeks, years, or decades. We think in terms of centuries and millenniums. One of my best-selling artists does paper mache. Well, they have dug up paper mache from China that's 5,000 years old. So if paper mache can last for 5,000 years, how long does stone last? How long does wood last? How long does steel and bronze and many of these other materials last? So artists don't think in terms of weeks, years, and decades. We think in terms of centuries and millenniums. Now, that could also explain why sculptors especially have sort of large egos. It's a bit like architecture. You know, we build things that last. And most things these days, by the time you're done using them a few times, they're obsolete. And one of the things that makes it difficult in my business is, even though we do a very good job of it, we have to keep records on the artist, the art, and the clients. Because even after the artist has passed away, even after the client has passed away, that work of art, it still exists. You know, so we need the information. And so I keep enormous dossiers on people. I mean, and I happen to have an incredible memory, being a sculptor myself. I can remember almost any space I've ever been in. I could tell you how long a room is. I could, you know, it's just sort of one of the, and I also could tell you the art that most of my clients have bought. I always kid around and say I have an extraordinarily capitalistic memory. I remember anybody that ever bought anything from me. I remember their house. I mean, I can not see somebody for 20 years and they'll walk in the door and I'll say, "Do you ever feel that space over the sofa?" You know, and they all sort of look at me like, what do you have, a Ring camera in my house or something, you know? But sculpture, to me, is extremely relatable. It occupies the same space that we do, you know? And I like the fact that you can move around it. I mean, real sculpture is stuff you can move around, you know, I mean, unless it's a wall sculpture. And I also like a great deal what we call negative space, which David uses. And, you know, the space that isn't there sometimes is as important as the space that is there. And there's only one thing in your video I actually disagreed about with you, David, and that was parting with your work. I always say, go out and support your mother. I tell my sculptures that. And Because the reality is, it's like a child who grows up. They're not gone. They're still there. You know, they might go through generations of families. I mean, and you never, I mean, artists usually are, people always say, oh, artists, they're not good at business and blah, blah, blah. I completely disagree with that. I mean, somebody who's been a successful artist throughout their lives, they could run a Fortune 500 company. Nothing is harder than being an artist. You know, and they're good on computers, and I mean, almost never does an artist say to me, I don't know how to send you slides. I mean, it just happened with an artist, but he's 75 and got bad eyesight and is older, so he doesn't do it. But that is incredibly rare. And the lucky artists have wonderful wives like Sandy who, you know, do a lot of their work for them. And I have a number of artists like that. They're like teams, and they work together. And they photograph their work and, you know, just promote it and do everything about it. But you are, as an artist, you are almost always going to feel at home in anybody's home who owns your work. I mean, you know, it would be actually a fun trip, you know, or a fun story to do. You follow an artist and all the pieces they've sold and go to different cities, and a number of years ago, the town of Paducah, Kentucky, was sort of a dying town. And it put an ad in the paper saying, we will give any artist that wants it a free home. And you heard this? And all sorts of artists moved there, and it really beefed up the school, and it really changed the whole town. You know, as in, and you know this story. You know, artists come to a neighborhood, you know, like 7th Street, and they spiff it up, and then, of course, the developers come in, and, you know, they go unless they own their own building. So, and now more and more artists are doing that. But, you know, that's, and like Sandy and David, you know, I mean, the place is gorgeous. I haven't been there yet, but your video certainly has made it look wonderful. And I don't think it's uncommon for artists, especially sculptors, to be into landscaping. And there's this whole new thing now. My stepson works for a company in California called Habitat Horticulture, and they do living walls. And you could put sculpture in it. And one of my artists, actually from Madison, Wisconsin, is doing living walls in his sculptures. So, I mean, I love landscaping, you know, and I mean, when I need to calm down, I go out and prune. You know, I mean, it's just pruning is something that relaxes me, makes everybody else around me insane, because I get up on a big ladder and I've got, you know, tools in my hand. But
what is it that speaks to you with regard to David's work in particular?
Well, many things. I liked it before I knew this about it. I mean, I liked it from the second I looked at it. I mean, it takes me probably 30 seconds to decide whether I like an artist's work or not. I mean, I'll look further, but it doesn't take me long. But I particularly like the part that it's all reclaimed. You know, it's all stuff he finds, or, you know, he doesn't go to the quarry and have him cut a big stone. And, but I find them spiritual. I find them calming. I find them inspiring and uplifting. And truthfully, they go anywhere. I mean, I can't imagine anything that these colors of stone would clash with, you know, and I like the fact you can see through some of them. And, you know, when he uses negative space incredibly well. And, you know, I'm one of these people who believes that, and it's really true of sculptors, maybe even more than painters, is that the best work is done, you know, and I'm using an example of using a chainsaw, but it goes from your gut to your hands and kind of avoids your brain. You know, your brain can screw up more things, you know, especially in a work of art. You know, it's got to be out of your instincts, out of your gut, out of your soul. It's not calculated, and certainly with wood, and I believe it's true of stone, that you let the stone speak to you. You let the wood speak to you. Ancient carvers of wood would always say they let the spirit out of the wood, and I think you let the spirit out in the stone. Stone has grain. It's not just, no two stones are alike, just like no two pieces of wood are alike, and no two people are alike. Stone was never alive. I mean, I always say to people about wood, can you think of anything that ever lived that once it was dead is as useful and lives as long as a piece of wood? I mean, we do everything with wood. I mean, the lobby walls are wood. Their desk is wood. Buildings are wood. Our utensils are wood. We heat with wood. Trees can live very well without people, but people cannot live without trees. So, there's something very organic, and it transcends, his work transcends time. These pieces could have been done a couple thousand years ago. And they could be done, well, if mankind still is around a few thousand years in the future. I tend to doubt that. But I think we're all going to be a really short-lived experiment at the rate we're going now. But we won't go there. And, and I always tell people you shouldn't own a piece of artwork if the most you ever like it is the first time you look at it. It's like a good relationship. It should grow over time. I also say that my least favorite way to sell a piece of artwork is because of a divorce. And both people, I have to have that piece. No, I have to have that piece. And I end up selling another piece very similar so both can have it. But, I would prefer that, I like selling the art, but I don't prefer that being the reason, if you know what I mean. But, so, David does, a lot of interesting shapes. He mixes interesting materials. There's a sense of balance to the work. Some work, it's hard to tell whether it might rock or not rock. No pun intended, or maybe intended. But, I like his mixture of materials, the glass, the bells, the metal, the wood. I am one of these people that feels that natural materials like stone and leather and wood, they don't clash. They're natural. They're like, human beings, this color of your skin. It doesn't clash with somebody else, contrary to people's extraordinary stupidity. So, it all goes well together. I mean, sometimes a one-person show of an artist's work doesn't all look good together. Or it feels like, oh, well, he must be just knocking these things out too quickly. But this show does not look like that. It shows his variety. I've never been a fan of artists who spend their entire life plagiarizing themselves. And I could give you some examples. Somebody, from Chagall to Brancusi. I mean, they spent their life doing what sold. I mean, it may have been them, it probably was them. But one would think that you grow as an artist. And one of my less than lovely analogies is if you just go out to dinner and you're feeling really, 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 really stuffed, and the next day what's supposed to happen does not happen, you don't really feel, I'm cleaning this up, you don't really feel like going out for another big meal. Art is kind of like that in the regard that an artist experiences life and then expresses it through their artwork, and then experiences more life and then keeps expressing it. You don't want to be blocked, you want to experience enough life that, you can still be creative. And occasionally I kid, and it's probably, often more true of painters, because it's probably easier to paint when you're extremely depressed than it is to sculpt, because sculpting is so physical. But sometimes going through really hard times, people produce their best artwork because they're just feeling that much. You know, their soul hurts and they're expressing it, or they're full of joy and they're expressing it. So art is about experiencing life and expressing yourself. Frankly, if artists didn't want to sell their work or share their work, they would just think it. You know, I can just think it in my head, oh, how enjoyable that sculpture is. I don't need to make it to share it with anybody. We do want to share our work. We want it to be in people's homes or museums. We want it to be seen.
Let me, we'll wrap up with a question. You know, he mentioned to me in the context of the video that he doesn't, you know, he works with the client or the purchaser of the art, and if he doesn't think it's going to work in that setting, you know, be like, let's try something else. That it's interesting. He plays a very personal role, kind of, in the relationship between his art and who's you know, kind of buying it. That fit between.
Yeah.
You know, do you have any?
I tell clients all the time, it doesn't look good. This would look better here. I mean, I've gone into people's houses, and this usually takes a rather secure person, and I have rearranged all their artwork, and I've actually been told I've saved marriages, because people can really argue about this kind of stuff. But it's, to get your clients to trust you, you have to be honest with them. I know honesty isn't in these days, but in the art world it is. And if something doesn't look good somewhere, I don't want it to be there. And I'll find them something else. In another spot, or people say, oh, I don't have more room. I'm like, I can find room, So yeah, you want your art to be in the best environment, and you want your clients to respect you. I may go a little further than that on giving them other advice, but I have a saying about giving advice. People who want advice and take advice are usually very secure people. Insecure people don't want advice. But the people who give the advice have to understand that when you give advice, you have to have a respect for the people you're giving it to know that they're going to ask a number of people, and then they're going to make up their own minds. If you're attached to whether they take your advice or not, I refer to that as manipulation. So you give people advice with a gracious heart, and I think they know that. And especially in like a case like David, where he might tell a client that, this probably doesn't work that great here. And I would think they would respect him more for that, because of course he wants to sell the work. Guy's got to make a living. And I don't know why people think that artists don't need to make a living, more of this has got to do with when you're doing commissions for cities or people like that getting paid. Could seem like tooth extraction without Novocaine. But, but usually the clients are, really great. I mean, I had a motto from the moment I opened my doors, which is the genius, good looks, and money is not an excuse to be an asshole. And so I want to like my artists. I'm not going to be standing on someone's bed at 11 o'clock at night hanging a piece of artwork for an artist I can barely tolerate. You know what I mean? And artists are generally rather, people want to meet the artist. They're not just buying the artwork. They're buying a piece of the artist. And that's different than any other thing we buy. How many things do you buy that you know who made it? What I sell are things that people get to know the people who made them. And that is quite exceptional. And one of the things we say is that if something goes structurally wrong with the work of art, it is one of the few things that is guaranteed for life. I mean, and it does not happen very often, but occasionally it does. I had an artist who had a bad batch of gesso, and all these paintings cracked, and it cost him thousands of dollars to have it fixed, but he paid it. And, because he couldn't prove to the gesso company it was their fault. I mean, they probably should have accepted it, but of course they didn't. But, you know, so artists have tremendous pride in their work. They use materials that last. Their art is about the truth. In fact, I used to say to journalists, art is about the truth. What is journalism about? But I kind of knocked that one off. I figured they're taking enough beatings these days. But, you know, but even with that, you know, sometimes even getting their facts straight is a little difficult. But artists do. Artists care about the truth. They care about the environment. You know, they're very connected to the world, and you know, they're great examples of how to be a good human being. Generally, there was about 4 buildings in downtown Washington that, when they were being built, they made deals with the city that in order to get maybe extra FARs. If you know what that is, it's called Florida Area Ratio. It's how high you can build a building and how much of your lot line you can build on. If they put art in their lobbies, or they had an art gallery in their, you know, that was for the public, they would get some benefits. So this is the biggest of all of those. I've done one other. I've done 901 East Street, but there's one at the DLA Piper Building around the corner, and there's another one in Carroll Square. And I was not the first person to get this contract, but I think I was the second, and I've had it since the mid-2000s. I've had one-person shows here. So this, you know, and now that I don't have a gallery right down here, and my gallery is up, you know, like 6 miles north of here in a community, it's nice to have a space right on 7th Street. But you have to understand when you're doing these public spaces that there's numbers of things you cannot do. So among that list is politics, sexuality, religion. So we tried to stay away from that. And now with sculpture, I have to say that it's pretty hard to stay away from bodies, you know, because most sculpture has bodies. I mean, why I knew we would get this show approved immediately is that there was, you know, I didn't have any tits in it. I didn't, you know, there were no breasts or, and so this, and, you know, this also looks good in this building. And so I've worked out a formula. I've got literally a layout for the building, and I pick the artwork. I know where the artwork goes, and so I literally do a sheet with the name of the artwork and the size and where it's going to go. And so if you look at my price list, you'd understand. And then there's also a schematic of the room, of which I number it, and so they can tell where everything's going. But there's still always a tiny bit of tweaking at the end. You know, like there was one piece that was just too large for the wall. I had to bring something else. So there's a tiny bit of tweaking at the end that you do. I mean, because, you know, as good as paper and pictures are, you still don't really know exactly how things are going to look until you get them in the space. And in David's case, I hadn't seen the work in person before I chose it. And with sculpture, you can actually do that. I do that more with sculpture than I would with painting. You know, I'm not 100% sure why that is, but, you know, I've sometimes chosen painters that once I get the painting in my hand, I go, oops, you know? So anyway, so, you know, I've got to give it to the people in charge and get it approved. And there's certain things I absolutely insist on, which is that they insure it at full market value, because I don't have the keys here, and they have 24/7 guards. But, you know, once in an absolute blue moon, somebody might knock something over and break it. And that's happened. But I don't think it's ever happened that anything's been stolen out of here. I mean, but it's a great location, and you could see most of the show at night now, you know, and specifically put large pieces in the windows. And, sometimes I kept saying, put them up higher so you can see them from outside. Plus, there's very high ceilings. And there's certain things you just can't do here. You can't hang anything from the ceiling. So I can't do mobiles or things like that. But it is, by and large, a sculpture space. It says it right on the door. If you look over those doors, it says 1111 sculpture space. And the critics are very good about covering it. And it's highly unusual to find a space this large in DC. I mean, if you were going to rent a space like this, oh my God, this is a couple thousand square feet. So right on Pennsylvania Avenue, all windows for half a block. So it's, and I get along, well with the guards and with the engineers and with the property managers and the guy from the law firm, Ray, that has to make the final decisions. And, it took us a while to get it so I didn't turn the lawyers into curators. You know what I mean? I let, they do their job and they get paid for it. I'll do my job and I get paid for it. So, but it's great to have a space down here that people can come into anytime, almost any time. So, and I think, they do appreciate it, and we both sell to people in the building, but we sell to anybody, because it all also goes up on our website. It goes up on Artsy, which is this big international arts platform. I mean, there was a piece in the show, 2 shows before this, that I was mentioning to you. I'm now selling to the University of Durham in Durham, England. I literally got to ship 2 9-foot, 8-foot crates to England. But they're actually easier to deal with than the people here. So you never know. You never know when something's going to sell. And I've said, I've literally waited clients out for 40 years. Somebody said, I will buy artwork, but I'm putting my kids through school, and then this, and then that, and then they finally buy something. So you never know. I mean, art is classic, and just because somebody produced it 10 years ago or 20 years ago doesn't make it any less wonderful than if they produced it today. I mean, nobody would call the Mona Lisa awful because it was made 500 years ago. I mean, art, and I'll end with this. I will say that what art is the emotional history of the time. The only way we know how people felt during the Renaissance, during the Middle Ages, during the plagues, are from the artwork, from the music, and from the literature. That is how we know how people felt. We might learn the history of it, but we don't know the emotion of it until we look at a work of art or hear a piece of music or read the literature on it. So, I mean, of anything, go back to the cave painting. That'll tell us how these people lived and how they expressed themselves and what they wore and what they ate. And I doubt there's any books from back then. So art, tells us a lot about the times we live in. But it's also good for all time.
Beautiful.
My name's David Terrio. I'm a sculptor.
Just give us your impression of what you're thinking about in terms of being in a much more formal kind of gallery space as opposed to out in the wilderness,
It's very different seeing all my pieces in such a formal setting or gallery setting. I'm used to them beginning out in my garden and ending in my garden and then going to a garden. So to see them on pedestals and stuff is a big contrast, but I think they still work. They still do what they're supposed to do. And I love the fact that it's going to reach an audience that maybe would never find me in the boondocks,
Beautiful. And what do you hope is the reaction people have to your work,
My hope is that I get the same reaction I always do, which is somebody's
Okay. This is a different atmosphere of which to sell your art, right? So
Very
the
different.
community's gonna be different, the potential customers. What do you hope kind of city folk gain from them?
Well, I hope the reaction's exactly the same as it is when you view it in the garden or anywhere. The whole purpose of it is to get a reaction. The reaction to me is the art. I tell a story, and I don't want to tell it so strong that somebody knows what I'm trying to say. I want them to look at it and feel whatever they want to feel, and I think that's what makes the art.
Beautiful. Tell us a little bit about this journey that you've been taking for many years, in relationship with Sandy. You're not doing this, you're a single artist, but you are definitely, it's something bigger.
Well, I think Sandy has always been so supportive that it allowed me to achieve the goals that I wanted to achieve, or at least strive to get to the goals that I wanted to achieve, which is really just setting up places for people to enjoy themselves, if not the art, if not the outside, if not, the countryside itself. So I think that she's enabled me to do that.
Okay, anything else?
Nope.
I'm an enabler.
She is an enabler.
Is there anything else you think I should be asking?
Mm-mm. My dog's name is Nala.
My dog's name is.
Okay, shall we do you want another kind of view on with her?
She doesn't need to be in it.
We'll get you at the
When we're walking in.
artwork and getting it into the space.
There were 18 pieces that they wanted us to bring down, and they're not that small. They're quite large. So it took a couple of days of loading and preparation on how the pieces fit in the truck and the trailer and the other truck. I have some great help at home, and they came down with me. And it's just a matter of slowly walking them in, and taking your time because they're quite heavy. That anything?
I read something about Washington D.C. being the nation's capital.
Well, you're a native DCer. You used to say to me, "Oh, you can just see the money go from one hand to the next to the next." Being that native.
I really enjoyed the drive down here. I came in on the, what's it called?
GW Parkway. Canal Road.
What's the,
Calvert.
what's the? Constitution Ave? Okay. So I came down, I really liked the drive. The drive was great. I came down Constitution Ave, and you go by the White House, you go by the museums where everybody wants to be, and you take a right and you're there. You're right down here on Pennsylvania Avenue, and for ego, that's really good, and I had a great time doing that.
Yeah, that's a great line. Is that good?
It's a left, right?
That's all right. Ben, I can see the B-roll that you just got with you saying that, so I think that's good. Yeah?
Yeah.
We could just get him saying it's a right and wild, and you can just edit it in.
Are you good?
I just put it.
It's a sound man joke.
10th Street.
What? Tell me. Okay, so let's see if we can just get you say that kind of one more time, talking about what it's like to know that your art is just a few blocks from the cap. We want you to say just a few blocks from the cap.
You want me to say I'm across the street from Trump's Plaza?
No.
Because that'll come out poorly.
Proximity.
But it's just very fun to be down here. It's fun to be in a place that you used to come and visit with your parents and walk around as a tourist, and it's just great to be part of that now, you know.
We wanted you to say, it's great to be just a few blocks from the White.
And it's great to be a few blocks from the White House. Oh, the Capitol. Oh, I know what you now.
We shot the Capitol.
You had the essence of what you were trying to say before.
Right.
Which was how amazing that you're now,
Right.
in the thick of all that, blocks from the Capitol. Just say it again. Just give yourself the vision, the verbal of driving in again. Repeat that.
Right. So I came in Constitution Ave, and you drive by the White House, and you drive down past the museums where you've always gone to visit. You have the Capitol in front of you. You take a left, and you're there. You're at 1111 Pennsylvania Avenue, and that's kind of cool.
Is that good? Tell us what your feelings are about this. Is the first show for Dave, and your sense for him.
Right. I can't say it's the first show of his I've ever been to, but it's the nicest one, and it's the most work of his I've ever seen in one place, except for the gardens. And it's so different seeing the work in a formal space as opposed to out under a tree or sitting in the middle of the sculpture garden. It's beautiful in here too.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience as an artist in terms of being related to the DC art scene and David, and just your sense of things?
I'm not sure I can give you a great perspective on the art scene because I've been a little out of it for a long time. I'm an illustrator, and I'm a scientific illustrator, so I'm a professional illustrator. I've been working full time at it for 35 years, But when I was showing in D.C., Marjorie Goldberg was across the street from the gallery that I was executive director of for a while. So, I mean, she's a stalwart, and she has really good taste, and she's kept her gallery business alive for this whole time. And she stayed downtown, which has been hard because this area has changed so much. But to see her with Dave's stuff, I mean, I think obviously, I own 4 small pieces of his. So I'm a fan, and I've known him since, I guess I met him in, I don't know, probably 1990, no, maybe 2001. And so I'm a fan, and I love his work. I love the way it's developed over time. And
how important you think it is to kind of showcase area artists?
Oh, it's really important, and that's one thing that Marjorie's always done. I mean, there's most of the DC galleries do show, I'd say 9/10 local people, but she's serious and she's stuck with it, and she's been an advocate for local creatives for decades, and I think it's wonderful. I mean, she's part of what has kept the DC art scene breathing for this long. So, and it's hard because of the renovations and it's not gentrification; it's the industrialization of downtown. When I lived down here, and the gallery that I was working with, a collective gallery was. The rents were low, the place was a dump. The 930 Club was actually in 930 F Street, across the street from where I lived, over a shoe store. And it was very different, but she stuck with it through all this. Now everything is chrome and steel and gorgeous, and it's great. And she's showing Dave, and I just think it's wonderful. So.
I think that's good. You have 4 pieces, so what is it about David's pieces that speaks to you?
Well, the best of his work is so elemental. It's not. It's the not. I like his non-figurative stuff the best, and that's what's mostly here. And it's just it's so strong. It's so elemental, and it just speaks to me. And one of the pieces I have, it's barely sculpture. He was doing some two-dimensional work on paper for a little while, but it had to do with rust and stone dust, and I love those, and I do have one of those. So, and the other pieces are stone.
So,
Can you tell us your name?
I'm John, and this is
Mel.
Mel Blanchfield. Yeah. We live in Montgomery County, and we've been followers of David's for many years, many years.
Tell us about when, because he told me you were really one of the first people he met.
Well, we
Well-
used to go out there when he had this fabulous nursery, and it was just the coolest place to go.
It was the cool nursery.
And then he started doing the artistic sculpture, and we
Right.
had absolutely no money, and decided that what
Right.
little money we had, we were going to spend getting a piece of his art,
Right.
because it would just make our life better, and it did.
So his styles evolved a lot since we bought pieces. He sort of had a very simple style. Now it's gotten far more complex, more meaningful, and more, I don't know, more interesting, do you think?
Well, but I think what's really cool to me about his pieces is that since our true loves are art and gardening,
Right.
we can afford more gardening than we can art.
Right.
But we incorporated some of his pieces, and he did a piece for us with found objects.
Right.
That he incorporated. It was something we found at a weird auction,
We go to weird auctions.
and it was an old piece of blacksmith. A frame, and it looked like a bird,
Right.
and he put it on this stone, and then he carved a little bird like a baby Picasso bird.
Yeah.
And we don't live in a glamorous part of town, but when we go in our garden, we feel glamorous, and we own original art that he made for us.
That was
And
very
it blends gardening and art together, and it's, I don't know, it's just kind of touches your spirit.
Yeah.
So you've known Sandy as long as.
Well, she's always there. I mean, when he had the retail nursery, which it was extremely cool,
Yeah.
the retail nursery.
Plants nobody else has.
Same location, right? And Sandy is sort of like the media director, the social media director, the sort of the artistic director. And I think she sort of restrains David a little bit too, like, whoa there, buddy, whoa. And so she's fabulous. And in fact, when David installed the piece that Mel just talked about, Sandy played the role of laborer.
Yeah,
Yes.
she had to come out and help him get it on the base in our garden.
Yeah.
But they have all the- I
she's
mean-
little, but she's strong. Right. So-
The shop they have, and then he started having other artists bring things into that just complement. When you go to
Yeah.
a garden, and his garden is beautiful, the sculpture garden is beautiful, you just get ideas, and
Right.
you feel energized and
Right.
happy, and you want to get something. And you can get one of his smaller pieces, or you can get a giant piece, but then you've got something nobody else has.
Yeah.
And it's in your house.
and-
I mean,
and
it's
we-
not, you
we've
don't have to go to the
given-
Hirshhorn to see sculptures. You can go in your own backyard.
Right. And we've given little pieces that he's made as gifts to other people. So.
That nobody sees anywhere else. And then the
Yeah.
artists that he has that sell in the shop are just very much one of a kind.
Yeah.
Just
It's out in the
cool
middle of kind
things.
of nowheres. Nowheres you can get in Montgomery County anymore, right? So-
But it's a fabulous place to go. They're fabulous people.
Yeah.
And, food and water feeds your body, but this feeds your spirit, and you need stuff. Even if you can't afford it, you need to buy one. That's what we did.
Am I married to you? You just sound so artistic.
When we met, he says, "Oh, your work reminds me of my work." And I was like, "Yes." And we had a
Our work goes very well together, I think. And I'm glad she went first because she had a lot to say about her work. I, of course,
And this is Dave.
this is David Terrier. I'm the sculptor, a stone sculptor, and my process is a little simpler. I just begin to bang on the rock until until I have made something. And that's why I call myself a sculptor more so than a stone carver. I don't do a lot of figures, and I stay in the abstract. But my themes, I believe, are very similar to your themes, and it's the spirit of the earth, the spirit of the stone, and how culture and society maybe puts a lot of pressure on it being something, whether it's a floor or a wall or something. And I like to try to use a cultural symbol or a shape that will let it just be what it was and be a stone, you know. So mine is life renewed or life saved, and yours being just the full circle of life, in the spirit of life. So that's it in a nutshell, at least.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
How did you get started? I mean, you know, my medium is wax now. I love wax. Now, how come
I'm a
stone?
landscape designer by trade or by schooling, and I worked with a Japanese landscaper who used a lot of stone in his Zen gardens, and he taught me a lot about the balance of heavy objects with lighter objects, and the movement of in the way the lines can move you, and negative space can move your eyes and stuff like that. So I got whatever training I've gotten comes from sitting with him in landscapes and getting the feel of objects in nature. And I'm unschooled as far as carving and sculpting goes too. I've basically picked up the rocks and began carving, you know, whether it was for walls in the landscape or for, you know, pieces for individual gardens. I just began to cut.
Wow. Well, we have something in common that I didn't know until you just said it. Zen.
Zen.
I had at least 30 years in Zen meditation.
Yep.
And I lived in a Zen temple. So Zen, yes, the balance, yes. All right. Cool.
And the movement of spirit or the movement of energy through things and away from things. Yeah.
Yeah. It's life. Art is life. Creativity is life. And that's one thing I tell everybody that I meet. Stay creative, because that's your power. That's your power. You don't create, even if it's a figure, okay, I'm going to do something with a group of people over there. You've just created a situation that was not there before.
Exactly.
So you created that.
It doesn't have. You don't have to be an artist to be a creative. Right.
That's right. That's your power. Don't let anybody take that away
That's
from
true.
you. High five.
Very true.
How'd it go, in your opinion, in terms of the reception that you think you're getting about David's work?
Oh, I think it went really well. I would, for lots of reasons. It didn't rain, and I always know if it goes well if I end up in a good mood. When I started out in a really lousy one, just because of lots of different annoyances in the universe. But you know, art is what sustains me. Art and people. You know, like when people come out, you know, I have some clients here who came from quite far away and to see the art, and you know, I think right now there's so few things in the world that sustain us that, you know, to me, you know, my family, my friends, the artists, the art, good food, you know, good pot, you know, those kind of things sustain me and get you past those moments that you want to crawl in bed and pull the covers over your head and go, this didn't really happen, did it? You know. So there were some wonderful people here tonight. Somebody bought a piece. There's other people looking at art. I mean, obviously, you know, as I always say, girls got to eat, and so do the artists. And so, you know, I think it's very accessible artwork, if you know what I mean. And also, the artist's work really looks good together. You know, I mean, Carolyn's stuff with David's, I mean, you know, couldn't be more appropriate. And Hubert's with all that texture and, you know, with the themes, I think just works well. And it works really well in the building. You know, the scale of it works well, the materials work well, and it's nice people can see it from the street, even though you can always tell a Washingtonian from a non-Washingtonian. I had a gallery with 2 storefronts of street frontage, and I used to watch people as they walk by. Washingtonians walk by looking at their feet. Everybody else walks by looking at the windows, looking around, you know, looking up. You know, Washingtonians walk like this. I'm like, you know, I mean, literally, they can walk by 2 storefronts of fantastic art and never look at it, you know. But that's their loss. And, you know, art inspires, and I get inspired by it. And David's stuff is, you know, it's timeless. You know, I mean, that's what good art is. You know, it's timeless. It does not, you can't really date it. And it will last. I mean, you know, artists, as I had said, don't think in terms of weeks, years, or decades. They think in terms of centuries and millenniums, you know. I mean, the house could burn down, these would probably still be standing, you know. So, and it's been a delight, you know, meeting them and dealing with them. And you know, and you guys, you know, are fabulous. And so the whole experience has been incredibly positive in that regard. And, you know, I just like bringing artwork to the public that they have not seen.
Well, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your relationship with David and Sandy?
Okay. So I met David and his wife Sandy through the Countryside Artisans, which are, I guess you know a little bit about them. So we're throughout Montgomery County, a little bit into Howard and Frederick, and we comprise of studios and all different kinds of artists, from fiber to sculptures to glass blowing, and I'm a potter. And we open up 4 times a year to people to drive around the countryside and come visit and see what incredible artists are out there. I am on the agricultural reserve, so I live on a farm, and I have my animals and my studio, and you know, we just find the beauty in everything, not just our art and the land and the animals and everything around.
And is that your sense of, tell us a little about your sense of David and Sandy?
Oh, yeah, we hit it off right away. Yes, they're wonderful, and they have the same love about nature and creating our art revolving around what we see and how we live. And
They have really taken on, it seems to me, the promotion of the artists in the context of the agriculture with passion.
very much so, yes.
Talk a little bit about that, because they seem to be your emissary, your greatest advocates.
Yeah, well, just their energy alone and their ideas and their, you know, not non-stopping, coming up, willing to listen, willing to talk, willing to take chances, and, you know, seeing what everybody wants and needs are, and just really being a part, wanting it to be a group, cohesive. So they're great. They're great that way.
And I guess the only other question I might ask is kind of the kinship that you might feel with you and David is just as artists, you know.
Yes. Yeah, well, you know, we can appreciate all the, you know, we tease about us always being muddy or full of dust, and, you know, we don't get dressed up a lot to get us out of our element, but we love it, you know. So, yeah, we have a lot in common of knowing what our frustrations are to produce it. We should say this, it's the love and our passion produce our art, but then it can get frustrating and tiring to get it out there so others may enjoy it like we do. which sometimes that can be the hard part, is to getting our word out there so people know we exist, so we can continue to create art. So, okay.
Can't go till he says we can go. Okay. First, can you just tell us your name?
Marjorie Scher, and I live in Washington, D.C.
And how did you discover David?
I discovered David because I love plants and I love nature. Somehow I heard about his garden shop, Alden Farms. So I went, and for years it was the place that I would treat myself on Mother's Day, and I would go to Alden Farms. And of all the garden shops I've ever been into along the East Coast, California, it is by far the best garden shop. In addition to that, not only were the plants fabulous quality, reasonably priced, but the way that they were arranged and the environment, it is like a sculpture garden there. And David's creativity just emerged in this space. So slowly, I remember him starting to create sculpture, and the sculpture would be there, but I was mainly there for the plants. And I talked to him about the plants, and I was always buying plants. Everything I bought there thrived. And when I look at these plants, I remember David. Sometimes he would give me a pot that he said, oh yeah, I got this pot, and it's a beautiful pot, and I don't even want to put it outside because I don't want nature to get to it. I just keep it inside. So over the years, I noticed that David started making more and more sculpture. And he has a workshop, and the workshop is attached to his house. And he was the one, his wife would work in DC and come in by train, and David would do his art and take care of the children, and the children thrived and they grew, and his sculpture grew and blossomed. And then eventually his home looked like a sculpture garden. In fact, I've said this could be a public garden. It is so exquisite. And that's how we met. And that was, what, 12, 15 years ago?
At least, if not more. It might be 19, 20 years.
Really?
Yeah, because I was open for 30 years.
And this man is one of the most creative people. I mean, not only is his spirit just absolutely wonderful, he focuses, he's detail-oriented, he listens to people, he's kind, he's just an amazing spirit. And he's one of the most creative people that I've ever met. He could take a drab, old, shabby barn and recreate it into a cottage. And he brings artisans from all over the area and together, and they have shows. And
What about as a DC, coming out there, I know what you mean in terms of how it feels out there. Depressing, magic that happens out there, just in your own soul, around art. We're talking about that
but to come here, when I heard about the show, which was about a week ago, and then Zenith Gallery, and I've known about Zenith Gallery for years in the other two locations, but Zenith Gallery, how are the artworks, which grew and were born as part of the earth and the landscape there, going to look and feel in an urban space indoors? They look fantastic. So over the years, my husband and I have been going out there. I used to, it's sort of everybody's treat. If I find a new best friend, I take them out there. I used to take my mother out there. It's just a treat to be in David's sphere. And now my husband and I are buying a work of art. It's absolutely thrilling.
Wonderful.
My thing is different. I didn't know who she was, and now I do.
So what's it like? How's it been for you?
It's a great experience. It's really neat to see it down here in this kind of setting. It's an honor to be able to come down here. I like the new faces, the new people that are reacting to it and finding that the reaction is somewhat the same. It's very good. It's you know, they understand it. It still says what I wanted it to say, even though it's not at my house in the garden. It still speaks of itself even here, you know.